I'm Bradley Roberts. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Neuromatch, where our mission is to democratize computational science education and research globally. And today we are thrilled to sort of have our next MEXA community event on how to build systems that change lives with Sean from Gooey.AI, who's the founder and CEO there. Before we kind of kickstart that workshop that Sean's going to lead us through today, I just wanted to quickly kind of advertise MEXA. So for those of you who don't know, we have been partnering with Welcome here at Neuromatch to build a new sort of research community at the intersection of mental health and AI. And we are really hoping to sort of use this community to leverage solutions and leveraging generative AI for increasing sort of capacity in mental health research and innovation. So this is our, I think, fourth community event, and we're really delighted to sort of see the community build as over time. And we'd encourage, if you haven't already, to create a profile at the mexa.app website to sort of join the MEXA research community. And this is sort of, I guess, our big next upcoming event or thing to be looking out for is our Generative AI for Mental Health Research Accelerator. We haven't put a lot of information out there yet, and we're going to be advertising for a launch webinar very shortly for the 24th of March, 2025. And what this research accelerator will do is it will allow accepted teams to gain critical support for building new research proposals, funding and resources for proof of concept studies for these research proposals, collaboration opportunities with foundation model industry partners, expert-led support for integrating lived experience into these proposals, as well as neuroethics support. And most importantly here, sort of exclusive access to Welcome's upcoming funding call on generative AI and mental health. So please do look out on our social channels for more information on this. We'll be launching a webinar on the 24th of March, and more information on that will be coming out very shortly. So yeah, please look out for that. So we are really delighted to have Sean here with us from Gooey.AI to sort of give us some real world examples of and training on building bots for impact. So over to you, Sean. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you, Courtney. And I also wanted to introduce my colleague, Martha Jennings, who leads our impact-related partnerships and is based out of the UK. And so I will start off. Give me a second to share my screen and see if I can still see everybody. So what we're going to try to cover is we looked a little bit at, the wish list that came in from the MEXA team and Bradley. Are you guys seeing my screen? Maybe.
No, we don't see it right now.
Okay, let's try that again. Now do you see it?
Yes, that looks
great. And so hopefully we will give you some stuff that's useful and actionable to your own work and the upcoming applications that I know are due. And so hopefully this all ends up being useful, and you can take a bunch from basically all of our hard-earned lessons in terms of how we've been building AI systems, and hopefully many of them are applicable to what you're doing. So in terms of what we're going to try to cover today is, some patterns that we've seen that keep showing up around, how to build structured data from unstructured sources, and we'll see what we mean by that, what it means to build for low resource and disabled users, a bunch of experience in terms of what we've got in terms of building bots, and then some final thoughts on sort of privacy-related trade-offs. And in terms of the kind of agenda pieces, you can see, like, I'll introduce myself and we'll go through a little bit of what do we see as the broad opportunities and some of the issues specifically in this field. How do we approach it? And then you'll see some demos and some lessons. And then we're here to basically answer questions at the end of this. I would just ask Martha and Bradley if you guys can monitor the chat room, because I can't see that simultaneously while presenting, and just, put your hand up if you want to interrupt me. That'd be great. So with much ado, who the hell am I? You can basically scan this and kind of see it. So my background is I grew up in California. I studied public policy and computer science. I did a short stint working for Ira Magaziner when he was Clinton's internet policy czar, but spent first 10 years of my career working at Microsoft as a product manager in Office and Windows. And then way back in 2004, moved to Bangalore, India as the third guy in the research lab there for Microsoft Research India, which was really fun. And we started essentially the Tech for Emerging Markets group. I then went off to start the largest informal sector job site in India called Babajob. We got to 10 million users, facilitated around 500,000 jobs. People increased their incomes that got hired by about 21% and reduced commutes by about 14%. And then sold that in 2017. And then 2 years ago, um, and then along the way, we did a lot around kind of chat interfaces as well. So I feel like I've been basically making conversational interfaces forever. I actually have the patent on machine translation and instant messaging from way back in 2005. And so this is an old field for me. And then so basically back in 2000, 2 years ago, right after Stable Diffusion came out, and a couple year, or like I would say 4 months before ChatGPT hit the market, we started Gooey, really with the goal of how do we enable organizations to take advantage of this new abstraction that seemed to be happening, where everything is moving into prompts and API connections, and it seems like everyone's job is going to be that of a prompt writer and an API stitcher. And so I'll kind of explore what we mean by that as we go forward. But that's me, and Sean at Gooey.AI if you want to catch up. I'll start with the sort of thing that kicked us off that in the agricultural domain, and then you'll see hopefully how we think it's really relevant in the mental health and the kind of broader AI domain. And so when I was at Microsoft Research, one of my colleagues, Rick and Gandhi, went off and started Digital Green. And what they did is they basically took a bunch of videos of farmers doing best practices and figured out that if you could spread these videos in in-person training sessions, you could convince farmers to change their practices and learn from each other. Really just taking one farmer talking about how to grow soybeans better and displaying that to another set of farmers 10 kilometers away. And this was one of the most effective ways to get behavior change, right, that they'd ever seen. And then 2 years ago, I guess in the fall of 2023, they approached us and they said, we've got thousands of these videos, we've got fact sheets, we've got PDFs, we've got call center logs. Could we take all that wisdom and stick it into a big bot and make it truly accessible to farmer extension agents, which are really mentors to farmers that are going out throughout India, Africa? And the result of that was ultimately a WhatsApp bot that was backed by their vetted database of knowledge and editable, that it had citations and links, and it worked in a variety of languages, and it could also do other fancy things like diagnose crop issues from photos. This was demoed in April in 2023 at the UN General Science Assembly. And then, this is kind of the simple demo of that thing, which is you could ask a question. You say, I think my chili has disease of the whitefly, and we'll work on an answer. It would give you that answer. You could rate it. You could do the same thing in Hindi. And then, it would also give you video citation answers back on WhatsApp. And if you want to check this out, you can go here. And so for us, the interesting part here was that this recipe, and you'll see, is available for any other organization to go ahead and also fork. And you'll see me talk about recipes and workflows kind of interchangeably. And then, the impact of this was relatively large, right? We've been working this for 2 years. It was funding with the Gates Foundation as well. And then, this is kind of earlier work that happened, but, the latest punchline of this with an N of 20,000, we're seeing income yield increases of around 46%. And this is now, the Gates Foundation has literally moved now hundreds of millions of dollars as of late last year to basically scaling these efforts. This now has 100,000 users in India. The government of India is rolling out a personalized farmer bot program in terms of giving better advice called STAR. It's been really quite successful and very exciting in terms of really making AI, and it's actually directly related to, changing user behavior that then leads to, clearly measurable SDG related impact goals. And so this is kind of the dream. And then we'll talk about how we see this happening in other fields here today. And then, so, a lot of our motivations as we build GUI, and as you kind of, and I see, and hopefully comes out today, is, we sort of have this prediction that as we all become these kind of like prompt writers and API stitchers, that we're all going to struggle with a very similar set of things, which is one, how do you find out what's working in your field? How do you find out, hey, these folks over here are doing some really amazing things around generative AI and, mental health. Can I just fork their stuff? Can I look at it? Can I look at their evals? Can I basically make that my own? And then second, how do we all keep up with this incredible pace of change, right? Which is clearly much of the investment of the world is collapsing into the AI space, which means it's really exciting and there's lots of stuff happening constantly. But, there's a real fear that I think is founded of vendor lock-in. And so in an ideal system, we would be able to take advantage of all of the innovations from OpenAI, from Google, from DeepSeek, from Meta, from the wider open source community, and sort of have a way to combine all of those all the time. And that sort of brings up this last part, which is I think that in this new world where all of these underlying models are constantly changing, evolving, and competing, for us that are trying to build useful stuff on top of it, we're always then trying to answer this question, which is if I make a change, if I use a different model, if I use a different prompt, is this, cheaper, faster, better for my own particular use case? And then as we get into, that's kind of, I think, the challenge that every organization is going to face. And then there's a whole bunch of, I think, problems that are really particular to those of us that are working in the kind of health and impact space that makes it even harder. Which is, you've got to protect PII and patient data, that privacy, open source, and on-prem ends up being a requirement for many of these things that, if an AI hallucination happens, it can cost lives and livelihoods. So you really have to control for that. That we have to be able to securely connect usually to old systems, that figuring out what are good and bad answers is hard, but terribly important. Performance matters, that a lot of this is kind of a technical point, but a lot of these RAG embedding things are generally natively don't understand visual PDFs and audio transcripts. This is getting better. But aid is very real, which is oftentimes when we build these systems, we can't assume that our knowledge bases are static and they generally need to be constantly updated, hopefully in the tools that people already know how to use, like, Google Docs and Word. That how do we find a bug is gotten way more complicated. Like, is it a code problem, an AI problem? Is it a percentage statistical distribution problem? Is it prompt? Is your data? That number 10, that this evaluation is super hard and yet it has to improve over time. And that's the only way that we can convince funders and those that we are accountable to that these things are worth continuing to invest in. That if you really want to reach a lot of people and you really want to do things that are specifically not focused on, financial analysts that are making $400 an hour, you've got to be cheap to run at scale. And while last time I checked, AI developers are the most expensive, resources on the planet right now. And so we really want to be able to do this without, taking on a dependency on a lot of developers here. And then finally, for those folks that are working again in the kind of low resource world, that low resource languages generally are not well understood by these AI systems. Like if you go underneath the top 40 supported languages, it's a bit of a mess. And then finally, low-end phones and poor connectivity are still very much a challenge, right, for half the world. So these are kind of the additional problems that, and then you'll see, hopefully over the course of this presentation, how we try to solve some of those. And then, we started with this vision of, even if we solved all that stuff, like how do we build work that is reusable, that's shareable in the same way that, for those of us who are old enough to remember like view source on the web and GitHub repos and the, very long tradition in the, the scientific piece of publishing papers and making those readable for everybody else, that they should be reusable like that. And we should be able to build on each other's stuff and that they're future proof so that as each AI model gets better, that we also get better. And so, how do we do that? And we'll kind of run through that here. And this is a little bit of, demos that you'll see and a little bit of, kind of like how GUI works that we take these as kind of our principles that we want to learn from each other, that we want to encourage reuse, both with a broader community and within teams, that we really want to basically make sure that we're including everyone. And that, the reason that software eats the world is that it keeps abstracting, right? And we get to keep leveraging all the great work that's now endowed into software that everybody that came before us. And if we keep abstracting, it's my sincere hope and belief that that's the thing that, gives multiplicative power to our ability to innovate as a society and keep accelerating and moving forward. And that would be great. So, what are we trying to do? The punchline of GUI is we're truly trying to make global impact at this idea of AI workflows. And you can think of us as a low-code AI workflow platform where we get to aggregate, basically private and open source AI. And we do a lot around, helping individual users at the front line to then make that happen. Here you can see some use cases that we do, again, in the agricultural space, but also in things like technicians. And so as we kind of run through this, the first part of our strategy and in this benefit is extended to everybody who uses us is essentially this part of like how do we aggregate and try to commoditize all of the models. So you can think of like when you're running stuff on GUI, all of the models are hot swappable. So, when you use an LLM or use a vector database or use a speech recognition piece, you basically just spend credits with us, and then we end up paying, right, for any of the models that you use. And I'll give you a kind of a real live example of kind of like how that works. Give me 1 second. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see this. So, if I go to this link that we had over here, which is just Gooey.AI/LM, this is basically something where we can come in and we can go ahead and compare all of the LLMs. So, right here, I've just said, in terms of coolness, what are the top 5 product makers who sell in the US? And then it's given me the sort of inherent biases, right, that are inside of each one. But if I go and I steal my little prompt that I was making over here, give me a second. And then let's say I've got like a transcript, which I'll come back around. And then I wanted to do something like say, hey, with this transcript that I've got here, I can go, the sort of tricks that you can do and that I would encourage you is you can basically come in and say, hey, I want to go ahead and, determine the phone number, name, and subjects discussed from this transcript, right? So excuse like any exciting demo, there's live coding. And then you can do things like just put in a variable. So you can say transcript here. And that literally puts in this little part. And so then I can paste this in, which was my dictated transcript. And I won't do all of these right now. Let's just turn off one, but then I can say, great, I then want to run this. And so this is literally just running a simple LM prompt, and O3 is a little slower because it's doing a thinking model against that. And then what this is doing is this is just running what I have made across all of those models. And then this is essentially the simplest example of a workflow where you can see that I'm running, as I mentioned, each one of these, prompts across all of these models simultaneously. So you can go ahead and compare them. If you wanted to, hook this up into your own code, each one of these is available as an API setting. So I can just click on API and I can see this for the geeky people out there. And then finally, I also get a history of all of the previous ones that I've run here. And then in addition, we don't just do the LM portions, as I mentioned. The more interesting ones, right, that we can imagine here is like, hey, I want to transcribe a patient history. And so here, what I've done is I just have a WAV file, which describes an interaction between a nurse taking in a patient history. And then, if you come to this speech recipe that we have here, the part that's interesting is, we aggregate all of the top speech models from Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, and then some of the lesser known ones out of India as well. and then allow you to do things like, if you're working with, say, Chichewa speakers, right? Which are, we'll say Twi, right? There's not that many models that basically go ahead and support Twi right now. And then if I wanted a slightly more common one of Swahili, like these are the 5 models that we host today that support Swahili. And then obviously English is super well supported too. And so these are now 2 then components, a speech component and essentially an LLM component. And then what you could do is you can begin to do interesting things when you basically put these together. And so the example that I'll have here in terms of putting them together is, if I take my little audio thing that I've got here, which created that transcript, you can then do things like say, hey, I want to listen to the audio recording and an attempt to determine the following structured data from this audio. And then this is all of the data that it's trying to pull out. And then for each audio file, what it's gone ahead and done is it's basically taken this Google Sheet that I've got here, and it said, what was the input, what were the sections, and then basically it combined all of that. So you can think of this tool as a way to basically bulk create lots of data. So, and a sort of stitching together 2 different parts, which is one, running this audio transcript, which it did here, which is, it took that WAV file. And then if you come down here, it basically used, the speech recognition settings that we saw here. So it's running Whisper 2. And then from that, it's then running an LLM script, right, that I'm basically specifying here with a model on top of each one of them. And then it's putting all of that into this Google Sheet that I've got here. And all of these examples we'll make available to you guys here. So you can go ahead and you can put in your own files and you can just change the prompt to basically create any output that you want, and hopefully really allow you to experiment much more quickly. So I'll pause at this point and just say any questions. I just want to make sure I'm not going too fast and skipping questions that people might have out there. Okay. I'll keep going. So as I mentioned, here we've got really incredible kind of language support globally. I think we're one of the few people that are hosting hot all of the largest language models. So in short, if you're working with any low resource languages, we're really good. And then, as I mentioned, we're kind of trying to extract all of these models into these workflows, which are just really sets of prompts and settings. And then that's kind of the main metaphor that is the Google Doc, if you will, of what we do. And then each one of these workflows, then you can talk to other stuff. So then, kind of RAG and the ability to talk to other documents is built in, the ability to like make a YouTube transcript, the ability to search the web, the ability to do things like say, hey, I want to analyze every page of a PDF that I've got. If I can open this up. Every page of a PDF that I've got and basically turn that into an augmented data source that I can then use for this workflow. That's the thing that sort of allows us to stitch one thing to another, and we'll kind of see how that works. And so, one kind of example that we have here is our doc search piece where you can really put in any document and then it'll go ahead and basically allow you to ask any questions around that with citations that come back. And then, the part that we are excited about, and hopefully that's relevant for this collection that you got here, is that all of these are available, right, on the site for you guys to go ahead and kind of fork and check out. So, if I go into, say, the Copilot Builder recipe, I can basically look at the examples and then see what are all of the other things that other people have built. And then if I like any of those, right, if I say, I'm really interested in, for example, like this, mental health workplace bot that somebody else has made, I literally can come in here and just say duplicate. And then boom, for anything that's there, I can then immediately change the RAG documents that back it up, the instruction prompts that are here, and you get kind of like a little preview of what this thing might look like. And then you can see, which is, if I then, once I fork that, you can basically put these things into your own like little workspace that you've got here. And so this is, I made for like the MEXA demo. And so this allows you, not unlike a Google document, to sort of collaborate on these recipes together as a team. And so that's kind of what these pictures are showing. And basically, and then the part that, that we begin to go deep, and I hopefully, kind of illustrates some of the examples that are more related to mental health, is we basically take all these workflows and then we allow you to go ahead and basically layer on all of communication platforms like WhatsApp, like Facebook, to basically then build bots that normal people can see. And so this is an example, right, that we've got, and I'll share the link right now, actually, so you guys can go ahead and play with it if you want to do that in the background. So, and then what this is basically a little demo that we have built that is intended to basically record conversations that a medical practitioner may be having with a family. And then those are happening via WhatsApp audio notes. And then this is basically just trying to schematize that data, similar to what we saw before, where we're taking those audio notes, doing a little bit of saying, hey, we want to create structured data out of this. And then we're putting it into a conversational context inside of WhatsApp, which is a tool that 2 billion people use every day. And then from that, we can then basically build this bot that will then go ahead and do things like interact with our actual backend databases. And so this is the kind of the experience that the practitioner is seeing when they're going and they're talking to patients. And then this is the actual workflow, right, that makes that thing happen. And so I'll take a moment to kind of dissect this and to give you a sense of like how all of this comes together. If you don't have WhatsApp, you can also play with that here. And so, basically this bot, right, that we've got going in here, it's, got a prompt that's relatively simple, which is, hey, you're Nurse Julie, and you're going through these steps. And then, we're trying to basically say, hey, we want to collect this data. And then we're ultimately trying to create a patient record. And then we're saying specifically, don't create any records until all of this data is captured. And then once it is, go ahead and create the record as a post to our Firebase database. And then this is our data object. And then this is the guidelines that you should keep in mind. And that's really it, right? And this is running live, right? And so, if anybody comes in, and if I just say like, hey, your name is, let's just change your name from Nurse Julie to, I don't know, Nurse Jane. And then if I hit update here, this will go ahead and immediately save that. And then for anybody that's using this right now, if you then ask that bot, what's your name? You'll see that the bot will change like what her name is on WhatsApp or that web link that I sent there too. The part though that's, and so, this is an example conversation, right, which is like, hi, my name is Nurse Julie. And then, this is basically an auto recording.
Your name is Raji.
And so this is just an audio recording that we've uploaded. And then again, we're just doing the same sort of transcription of that health history. And then, there's some interesting things here, which is like, hey, it looks like the telephone number appears to be wrong. Can you fix it? And so then if I say, oh, sorry, it should be, this, and then, sorry, and I left out that digit. So it's 7-1. It now then, given the power of LLMs, it knows that, telephone numbers in India are supposed to be 10 digits long, and then sort of is giving me back, hey, this is what the data I've derived, and this is the record I'm about to create. And then if I just say like, go ahead, it then will go ahead and look at my answer. And then the part that even begins to get a little magic is through the magic of like function calling and agentic stuff. It's calling this function that we have here, which is basically pushing this medical record into our database. And, the way that that works is, in addition to you being able to specify, again, these sort of speech providers and like how it talks back, you can basically just hook up little bits of code, right, that we have here. And so, the code that we have that's running here is just really about 15 lines that will take that JavaScript object and push it. But one of the things that it does is we don't want to store telephone numbers on essentially our servers. And so what it's doing is it's basically with this little bit of code, it's hashing that telephone number to protect that user data before it's basically sending it back to our database. And then, our database is then pretty simple, and I'll show you what that thing looks like here, which is, this is like a live, real Firebase database, right? That is just the record of all of the records that we see here. And so, and this is what we're kind of interacting with back and forth. So, so basically now it's push the data, and then if I want to do something simple, like say, hey, I'd like to look that up, right? And so if I say, give me the record of the patient with the, right. And I'll put in a different one than I had yesterday. I'll do the one that we just added, just to, it will then, go ahead and it'll just do a get, right? And it first hashes that and then calls our database with that crypto hash, and then, gets back those patient details and then, pushes all that back to me. And so, hopefully this shows you two things, which is one, or three things, which is one, like how do you, simply build a bot that we have here, to how do you hook that up? And literally it's just a matter of you go over to integrations and you click add an integration and then click your website if you want to put it there to make that little bot. And so, that makes this little widget that you saw here. And if I then want to say, great, I want to add this into WhatsApp, you basically need to get a SIM first, and then you can connect it into WhatsApp. So one, we're showing you basically, what is the script that really drives this bot, how to hook it up to one of those integrations, how to basically, get it to talk back and forth with your own database. And then within that, if you want to run code that basically is hashing those things, you can basically make that happen too. And again, this is just a public recipe, right? So that any of you guys can take this and sort of fork it and put in your own documents, put in your own use case, and kind of make it your own in a collaborative way. So any questions there? I know I covered a lot and there's a lot in there. Okay. Oh, I got one hand. Can we? Okay, that was a clap, not a hand. Okay, I'll keep going. So then just to, figure out like what the hell is actually happening there, right? Which is sort of repeat of like the nurse has this problem, and basically everything in the white boxes that's not green is sort of stuff that we cover, and the stuff that's in green is the stuff that you guys would put in, or sort of use case specific. And so the idea is that, the nurse has got a problem. They ask this co-pilot, they basically can upload photos, videos, or text, right? And then, then we are basically taking from different sources of data here, which could be PDFs, it could be, these Google Docs. And then, the LLM, using a variety of, any of these LLMs, can basically summarize the snippets that it's got back, plus the conversation history, and then use any of the tools that we saw here. And then finally, at the end, it can then do a translation text to speech. And if you want to do things like make a talk, you can hook those up as well. And then to give you kind of a sort of similar thing, but even more complicated, like this is how we're doing these things in the agriculture domain, where, folks over there are putting in their own knowledge docs. That goes into basically this, synthetic data process where we're really creating a FAQ so that we get back page level citations. Those go in, into this big kind of like Google Sheet where people can edit them. That goes into a database here. And then, via Twilio or an Android app or the web or WhatsApp, it doesn't really matter. We're basically taking an input over here, and then we have this pipeline where it's going into, speech recognition and doing translation. And then, and then it goes into a conversation history. And if you want to grab a little bit of data that you have about like the user via their telephone number, you can hook that up. And then again, this is sort of the RAG pattern of it goes into the RAG database. We do a search against that. We summarize that. If we need to make more function calls, we do it. And then it kind of gets translated and pushed back. And then, after the fact, and we'll kind of get into this, the evaluation part now, which is, we sort of have a bunch of tools that are built in that allow you to then structure those conversations and then really build out kind of theory of change to determine, hey, are these things actually making a difference in people's lives? And the kind of analysis side that we'll kind of get into now. So, we built these bots, we built these systems, but the real question is like, well, are they good, right? Do they change people's lives? Are they the right things that we should be doing now? Um, and so to give you an example of that, we've got this tool, which is our bulk runner. Um, and what that does is it allows you to do things like say, hey, with your bot, you can run it via, in this case, OpenAI versus Gemini versus Claude. And then what you do is you provide your kind of golden input and output. And so this is like your use case specific eval. And so in this particular case, you really want this golden input and output to represent common questions that you would expect users to come with. And if there were an expert there, how would that expert answer? And so in this particular case, we say, we assume that the farmer's question was like, I want to grow potatoes in the Haradari district in Uttar Pradesh, right? And then, this is what we consider to be like a good answer. And then what we're doing is we're basically running versions of the bots, right? And so, that you see here, so this is our agriculture one via OpenAI, this is agriculture via Gemini. And then what we're doing is we're just taking all of those answers that you see up here, and then we're comparing them for how semantically similar they were to our golden answers, and then scoring that to basically come up with which is the best model in terms of similarity to this golden answer. And again, this is itself a tool that any of you guys can go ahead and fork and kind of make your own. And if you wanted a different evaluation script, you can make that happen too. And so, we use the same set of tools, if you come over here, to do the same thing to compare speech recognition engines, right? To say things like, hey, given a set of audio samples from this particular dialect in rural Karnataka, and these particular sets of what audio sets and what should be that translation and transcription, we're running the same tools for us to determine which is the best model that we should be running every day. On the Copilot side, we basically give you a bunch of like out of the box analytics, right? Of like what's happening across this. And then kind of more interestingly is we can run optionally like another analysis of each question. And so each time there's a question coming in and out, right? Like this is basically the incoming message. And then what it's doing is it's analyzing that, and then via your own schema, right, which you have purpose of visit, primary healthcare, health issues, it's then spitting out this data and this data object. And then what we do is then you can basically take that, and if you go to our Nurse Julie example again, excuse me, over here, you basically have custom ways to take that, and then you can basically just make dashboards out of it. So it's really nice and very flexible in terms of your ability to basically, in this over here, just use an LLM prompt to define any data that you want from the conversations. Like if you want to determine, where's the location of this user? What is the LLM's determination that a certain key question was asked in the patient onboarding, right? You can basically put all that structured data here from the audio and kind of chat conversations, and then use essentially the dashboard pieces to basically see how is that changing over time. And where is that all going? From our perspective, and this is not built in yet, but will be coming shortly, is basically helping anybody that's in particular really building these bots create a theory of change, right? And so here, we have this theory of change in this particular case. If we're doing like triage for mental health, right? You can imagine in this particular case, we've set up like a Twilio number that's, a domestic abuse hotline in an area that's particularly underserved. And then what we really want to know is, do we connect people appropriately to services? And so our theory of change is if this bot works well at doing that triage piece, people will be connected to services and that they will show satisfaction around that. And then if that's our kind of theory of change and our goals, then what we can do here is we can basically spit out a whole mess of metrics to say, are we achieving that? In terms of what are your weekly actives, how many are retained, how do you basically use this kind of post analysis to basically determine, okay, are you answering people's questions? Again, this golden answer, like, every time you're getting closer, you're getting in there too. And then you can do things like say, hey, I want to group by category, as you can kind of see here. What are the questions people are asking about? And then how often are we answering those questions well? And then finally, if you sort of layer on things like, did you follow the advice that we gave you, and NPS surveys, you can get closer and closer to, knowing basically as part of like, what's the level of impact that you're having. In this particular case, you can imagine that at the end of this, just like you saw, at the end of, creating a full health profile, we'd say, great, if you qualify, here's the telephone number that allows you to now talk to a real person and a real therapist here. And then the one other piece that ends up being super important, especially as you're considering scaling these things, is what is your efficiency, right? And so in particular, cost efficiency, which is like, how much did that triage cost you to get, or, to get to that level of satisfaction? How much did you have to pay in credits and GPU and all those other things? And anyways, I would just say this is a really important part to basically determining whether something should scale and whether it's more effective than alternative solutions. And you'll see us basically try to give you lots more transparency in terms of what's happening there. I'll pause at this point. Questions? I think there was a question from Peter in terms of low resource languages, the solution scalable to some really low resource languages. The exciting part is, as I mentioned, we are one of the few people that host hot some of the largest models. So there's a few models out there that are very exciting, like in particular, the large MMS model from Meta. This actually has 1,000 language support. The only disadvantage is it does transcription really well in most every language. It doesn't do translation in all of them. And so, but the Google Translate support is pretty good and continues to get better. And then we do stuff like you'll notice if you come in here, we host like Ghana NLP. So there are smaller players for low resource languages that, if you've got one that you really want us to integrate with, you can come and talk with us too. But basically, we're just trying to aggregate literally the best that's coming out of all of the labs in one place and then allow you to compare them. So any other questions before I keep going? Okay. So, to kind of step back a little bit of like hard-earned lessons in this space, we would very much encourage you guys to start with like the goals and the KPIs, right? That we found that it's a lot easier if you're super clear of this is how we think we're making an impact in people's lives, and these are the assumptions we're making around that of like how they will use it and why they'll use it. And then once all of those assumptions are sort of mapped out, you can then make these kind of really what this is just a funnel, right? To basically analyze at each one of these steps, what's your drop off? How well are you doing? What are the parts in this kind of funnel that are failing? And we've just found that's a really important process. And then to start also with this idea of your golden Q&As, which is for any of these systems, the clearer you can be of this is the input that I have, whether that's a patient audio record, right? And or a conversation or any other piece of input data. And then this is really what you'd like on the output side of, hey, I want to structure this that it looks like this, or I want to determine, these factors from the conversation. The clearer you can be about those golden inputs and outputs. And again, you don't need that many. 50 is often sufficient. 10 is good to start. Then you can kind of optimize the whole chain of AI stuff that's kind of like happening underneath it. But if you're not super clear on this kind of golden input and output, we notice that there'll be problems and kind of ambiguity and differences of opinion about, what people think these things should do or not do. And again, all of this is working under the assumption that the models are always going to be improving, that you're working on top of. And even this whole, like, how do you get it to get close to these golden inputs and out, like that whole process will improve. But the part that won't improve or won't change from the rest of the industry is like, what do you really want at the end and out of this? The second lesson that I think we'd have is, getting everybody to sort of turn into like a reasonably competent prompt engineer is a good thing. In like, this is the new Excel. I really like this course. We'll link to it. This is a deep, from Andrew Nigg. He's a professor at Stanford. He's done some great stuff. But it's just 90 minutes. And literally I think we've been doing prompt engineering since 2020. We had really early access to GPT-3. It really condensed about 2 years into 90 minutes of those lessons. So I would definitely recommend that. A couple other thing of like, I would really avoid fine tuning in the traditional sense where, you go ahead and you'll get like 20,000 data items and try to train some better version of Llama. And the reason for this is we're just seeing over and over again that the general models keep getting better. And so you may spend months training some fine-tuned model only to have it work for 2 months, and then a new version of Gemini or OpenAI comes out and suddenly it's not really needed. And so, as you're thinking about this, you want to try to keep thinking of in this kind of vendor abstracted way so that you can really take advantage of all the good stuff from all of them. And then the only caveat on that is there's a new set of stuff that was really announced just in December, which are really these new wave of reasoning models, which are O1, O3, DeepSeek. And what they do is they sort of think step by step. And the thing that I think we'll see in 2025, and this is where I feel like you can bring a lot of value to your respective organizations, is to start creating data sets of how do experts in your field approach certain problems and how do they think about it step by step. So if you have a clinician or an expert clinician that's analyzing trainee clinicians, how do they analyze their work? What do they actually do? How do they annotate it? Those data sets that are sort of built organically from your own use cases, but built from the best in the field, those data sets I think are going to end up being super valuable because those will be training the kind of next round of AI models to really act as well as any of the experts in these fields. So I would say that's an interesting one to like, don't focus on the tuning, the GPU side, but the data itself for your fields, I think are going to be super valuable. And then on, kind of some thoughts on the privacy side, which is, at least right now, the best models that can kind of, do this function calling, work in most languages, et cetera. They're still very large and they won't run on your MacBook. And hence, from a privacy perspective, obviously the most secure is going to be to run locally, right, on your own machine. But your hardware issues are probably going to be real. Like, we run we've got at any given point 10 different GPUs that are running, that each of which costs $2,000 a month to run all of these, just the larger open source models that we want to. And then, we're calling all of these other private ones. But, as you're running this, you have to assume that you and your provider will be hacked. And so that basically just means you want to hash everything you can. You want to ensure that no API trains on any of the data you're pushing to them. That's true of everything that on GUI, because we have enterprise agreements with every provider, nothing trains on top of what we do. And then, for us in particular, we also have these no retention calls that you can make that basically will blank out any history, right? In order to protect data as well. So you can think of it as like, you give an audio transcript of a patient history, you ask it to transcribe it, you then immediately delete that transcription, and then then pass it to an LLM that basically creates that structured data, and then hashes out and hashes out any personal data, and then again deletes effectively what happened in that transaction other than the fact that it occurred. And so, if you want more data on that, we kind of describe this in greater depth at Gooey.AI Privacy 2. And so again, we'll send links on all that. but it sort of describes the flow model of how that works. And then the other thought is, you can try to run these things all in your sort of own cloud VPN, which gets really expensive really fast. And I would argue that they're really no more secure than having a contract that says that, Google's not training on your data as well. But I can kind of dig into that. But I just think the cloud VPN stuff is a good way to spend a lot of money and time and effort. And I'm not sure that you really get a whole lot more out of it. So those are kind of the closing thoughts. And then I would just say every demo that we showed today, we will sort of make available to you guys if you want to kind of build on it. And then obviously you can get in touch with us if you want to go anything deeper. But we're here to help. So at that point, if you've got questions, I would love to chat.
There was one more question in the chat from Peter. So what are the best practices you can advise with managing hallucinations for some of the most popular LLMs?
Yeah, so the techniques that we've seen around this and that we have used. So one, using a RAG model is a good way to basically, make that happen. And so literally, what you do is in the agriculture, for example, the bots, we say, hey, when you get a question in, go ahead and search our vetted database here. And if you don't get back an answer that came from one of these search sources, just say you don't know, right? And so that's one way to really restrict the domains so that the bot is only doing summarization of the results that it got back from your vetted documents rather than leaning into its own model. Now, the only thing I will say is it's still summarizing the snippets that it got back from your documents. And so there are some occasions where, we've had clients that are giving like tuberculosis advice over the phone, and they're not comfortable with that either, because they don't trust the they don't trust the essentially the thing that comes back. And so if you really want to be absolutely positive that you're not, that at a word by word level, there are no hallucinations, then the technique there is you're sort of then map the question that people have into a prescribed question or a question for which you have an approved answer. And then you're just returning not the answer to their question, but you're saying, hey, you asked about, your kid having a fever of 103. We don't have that one, but we've got an answer of what to do if your kid has a fever of 102 and what the doctor said was his approved or her approved answer. So in that particular case, what you're doing is you're basically not mapping the answers for how similar they are. You're mapping the questions. So you're saying, I've got an incoming question and I'm finding in my own RAG database a question that's very similar, and then giving the answer that's associated with that. The only problem with that, there is a gotcha there, which is sometimes these systems will say they don't deal very well with negation, right? And meaning, if you look at how embeddings work and you say, hey, I've got a kid who has a fever of 103 and has a stomach ache. The problem is if you get somebody that comes along and says, I've got a kid who has a fever at 103 and doesn't have a stomach ache, sometimes the embeddings ignore the not. And so then you'll get back an answer which may have not included or basically have a negation of the exact same thing that the user was asking about. And so the issue that can happen there is you'll give back an approved answer from an approved doctor, but it's up to the user. It's kind of like search on Google today to then take the next step to say, well, is this question answer pair relevant to me? And they have to be hesitant about that. So those are some of the issues that we've seen around it. But and so I know there's not like, never believe anybody that says like I have a 100% solution to this problem, because I really don't think it exists. right? And each one of them has kind of these issues that go with it. I do think you can make it better by, looking at and iterating over time. So you can make an analysis script that says, hey, the user asked this, we gave back an answer that was kind of similar, and then have your kind of post-factor analysis to say, are these questions really similar or not? Right? So that at least you as the analyzer and the person building this can say, how often am I getting these cases where the negation problem is coming up in it often? And then the second thing is to say, to again, use the kind of meta-analysis to say, how often am I getting what is considered to be a strong hit, where the question that the user asked is actually very similar to something that I've got? And then what are the cases where I'm literally saying, I don't have an answer for you and I don't know? And then to unpack that 10%, and then fill in your own knowledge base over time so that gets filled out. I don't know if that answers your question, Peter. That was kind of a long answer. Others?
Yeah, Sean, thank you so much.
Sure.
Love your answers. Thank you so much. Been very rich.
There's some.
Sean, I just said thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm
I heard you.
satisfied with your
Okay.
response. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would have a quick answer. Question, I mean. I don't have an answer to that. May I? Can you hear me, Sean, okay? Okay, wonderful. First of all, I'm super impressed by this. This is really inspiring work, and thank you for doing it.
Sure.
The second thing is that, so we're a psychopharmacology lab. What we're building is tools that help basically guide clinical trial participants through mental health assessments. And the issue that we have that you might I would love you to hear your thoughts on is that sometimes we have a certain idea of what the user might be asking and we can guide them well.
Yes.
But users tend to do things that we do not expect.
Yes.
So do not follow the conversation as we think they might do and start asking things that are completely irrelevant.
Yes.
Sometimes on purpose, sometimes, just because they are just not focusing very much, sometimes, various reasons. How have you dealt with this? And is there in the workflows that you showed us, where is there kind of a quality check on and kind of a safety, you know what I mean? A kind of safety guardrail so that the user doesn't get into a weird space where they might be, for instance, start chatting with an LLM in an unsupervised manner?
So generally there's two parts, which is one, if I just go back to this like Nurse Julie example, right, where we're asking the user to provide, right, and then we basically saying, you want to capture this data, right? And we're not actually telling them, please ask this question after this question after this question. And so, if you go back here and so all I'm saying here is it doesn't matter the order, right, that's happening here, because you've given the LLM the goal of gathering this data. It will then keep returning back to try to gather this data until it does. And then once it does, it will then, say, hey, I've gathered everything I need and I'll record it. And then in terms of keeping the user on track, I usually just put it into guidelines. So here we could say, it's just like, keep the, only answer questions, related to health, and politely, refuse to answer other questions. Answer questions outside of this domain. And so generally that's usually the way that we have then, tried to steer them to basically prevent jailbreaking or prevent the bot from saying something dumb, which usually, many of these things are safety tested, but if you really want to restrict the domain, so you could say health, or you could say, in your particular case, to, completing this clinical trial, right? And then it will then not answer things related to that. And so it's a little bit of prompt engineering. And usually, though, the way that we do this is we'll take this, we'll do these prompts that we do, and then we'll use this bulk tool that we have, and we basically put in those hard corner cases. And then we give a golden answer of what we would expect a good answer to be if somebody has a non sequitur, and we put that in here. And then we basically then rate, okay, we made this change. Are we now dealing with those hard questions better? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. Thanks.
And so again, it cuts back to my earlier point of why it's so important to have those golden questions, right? Because then you can then test really quickly that if you make a change, did you screw it up? Do you have your core use cases in some new weird corner case? You can just keep throwing those in there. And then every time you're making a change, you're just saying, great, does it pass all the tests?
Okay, cool. Thanks.
That's the kind of pattern that we do. And again, I will say there's a little bit of, prompting magic, right? That's sometimes required to get these things to work out. And some of that prompting magic is model specific, right? Like, that prompting magic may be different between Claude versus Gemini versus OpenAI. So keep that part in mind. Other questions?
Okay, we've heard from two guys. I want a woman to ask a question. There's one. Ellie.
Hi, my name is Ali. Thank you so much for the presentation. So we're building a kind of journal that is conversational for people to kind of journal through their day outside of therapy sessions. And at the end of the journaling, we want to generate an image that represents a memory of this day. So I was just wondering very selfishly, do you think that's something that we could be using your tools to power?
Yes, we will send you. If you send me an email, I'll send you the recipe that does just that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So no, and again, this is sort of power of being able to stitch anything to anything else. But yes, you can do such things.
Because we were using Inflection Pi. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if they're keeping it updated. It seems to kind of be stagnating. So we're kind of looking at other options at the moment.
Yeah, ping us. We offer a whole mess of image models underneath the hood too. And the part that will be, I think, useful to you is you're going to want to take their data plus some prompting that is your image style and merge those together in an LLM prompt. And then so basically you'll have another LLM prompt that will make your image prompt at the end of this, and then you'll output that image back. And that will allow you to have sort of consistency in the image creation, right? Which I think will be beneficial.
Super. Thank you so much, Martha, for pushing me to do this.
Well, we can't see your hands raised without your video on. So anybody has a question, anyway, we can't see the yellow hands.
I think you can do the virtual hands under Reactor. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Zoom has changed these things. I don't know how to put up your hand. The only other thing on that, Ellie, is you could take it farther. We also offer, there's like animation stuff in there. There's plenty of things you could play around.
Very cool. Thanks.
Sure.
I'm gonna email you.
Sure. I would just actually be curious of like if folks have other problems that they're running into, like what's difficult as you guys are sort of putting together these applications, and I'm curious if there's been challenges that folks have run into in trying to use these tools broadly in the AI space.
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for the wonderful answers you have given. Just to respond to your question, because this might sound strange. Okay, so compute resource is a major problem that some of us have.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were talking about running your models on GPUs and all of that.
Yeah.
That's a serious problem. So I think that gives an answer to you quickly. But you see, when I was asking about the low resource languages and the issue of scalability, what I had in mind are languages that don't have a very sophisticated corpus yet, which might in future have. So the question is, is it possible that if there's a language whose corpus is still being developed right now, and then maybe in the next 2-3 years, it will have one released on the internet, is this your solution able to capture that? I don't know if you got my question right.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I would just say, like if I look at MMS for that meta MMS model, it's got 1,000 languages that it supports, right? The history behind it is interesting because what they did is they worked with Bible organizations all throughout the world, and they took their transcripts of audio Bible. So they're really good at phrases that are found in the Bible. They're not so good with like fertilizer names and prescription names because those don't appear in the Bible. But they give you a base level of transcription in most languages. And so the pattern that we follow usually when we're doing low resource languages is we'll do translation to English in and translation to out on both sides. So that all of the logic, all of the RAG documents, all of the kind of, thinking, if you will, is happening in English. And then we're just saying, listen, when you come in, translate from this language, right? And so to make that very tangible, right, in terms of like, how does that work? So if you wanted to take our Nurse Julie example here, right, that we were talking about over here, and you literally just say, hey, I want to translate, I want this to support. What is the language you work in, Peter?
Okay, Igbo, IGBO.
IGBO. So yeah. So right now there's 2 of them that support it. And so you would probably, in your particular case, you would just turn this on. You say IGBO and then choose one of them. And again, you can run these kind of evaluation tools to see which one's best. And then, you can basically choose Google Translate or use Seamless 4MT has built-in translation as well. And so you'd use this, and then you find an appropriate kind of voice piece out in terms of, speaking it as well. And then go ahead and try it out, right? So then, here, if you said hi, right? And so now it should go ahead and translate everything as it goes back and forth. So it'll do this translation of in, but then it'll also do translation out. So I don't speak Igbo, but this is what it would give on the other side.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Sure. Any other hard problems? Like we love the tough ones.
I have somewhat of a data rookie question. My name's Ant from Cape Town. We were using the community health toolkits to gather a bunch of info in communities. Feels like a somewhat old open source tool. And so this kind of bringing in a bit more of this looks amazing. I saw you showed some examples of sort of get and post requests. Is there any integration yet or in the pipeline for sort of direct database integration? Specifically thinking because we don't have a API set up yet, and obviously we could just build that, but I'm hoping there might be a shortcut somewhere along the line.
Yeah, we don't host a database directly, but we do have examples of like this is how you interact with Airtable. Right? This is how you interact with Google Sheets, right? And then this is how you interact with this particular Firebase one. So, Firebase is very simple. Airtable is just like, Excel on steroids. And so, yeah, we could show you those examples. And then generally they're just doing a, read, write, and CRUD, right? To basically get that. And so, we haven't abstracted all that at the database level, but right now you still have to make you can use Google Sheets for it, right? But if you want a database, then we'll, as I said, right now we're basically just talking to those things via REST APIs, and we can give you some examples that hopefully makes that easier.
Okay, no, I think we must just build a REST API. Thanks.
Yeah, and so that's usually the main point, and I didn't show it here, which is we do have really strong secret support, so it basically allows you to put an API key in there, and so then the bot will basically when it needs to look up data from your site or for your database, it'll take your secret key and then pass that off with your request. And you can pass in like the telephone number, get back your record, give that back. And then the LM, knows everything about that user. And then you can prompt it however you'd like. And so like we're working with Safaricom in Kenya on a bunch of like agriculture related stuff. And they are following that pattern really, which is you get an incoming WhatsApp piece, we look it up, we see do we have consent from this person? If not, we'll do something different. And then we go on our merry way. We also have tools where, if you want to push back the data to your own systems after each interaction or at the end of the day, there's tools to do that too. Anything else? Okay, so just in terms of getting in touch with us, right? So basically if you sign up, everybody gets 500 credits, which is about $5, right? So you're welcome to fork any workflows that you need up there. And then if you need more help, right, you can get in touch with us and, Martha and me. And the only thing that I would suggest broadly is I really do think like we have the ability that if we share more of these prompts and we share more of the work that we're doing and put it out there, then hopefully we can learn from each other. And so insofar as you can, make those things public.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Sean, for this presentation, and Martha for your support. It's been really awesome to hear everything Gooey's doing and how it can really, I think, support a lot of the folks on this call and the people who will be going for that acceleration application, and just more broadly as well for folks doing other projects. So thank you so much for your time. And yes, Martha and Shauna both shared their emails, and I just put a quick event survey in the chat. So we love to have feedback from everyone, continue to improve on our events for the future. So thank you all so much. And as I shared as well, I will be posting the recording on MEXA as well as on our social media so folks can access it.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.